The bitter cold of an Arizona mountain winter had kept most men away for 3 months, which was exactly why Caleb Stroud had chosen this place to disappear. Dawn painted the snow-covered pines in blue shadows as he split wood with mechanical precision, each stroke bearing the discipline of his cavalry days. 3 winters alone had taught him efficiency, the difference between survival and freezing to death. His breath clouded before him as he paused, the silence complete except for the distant cry of a hunting coyote. The wooden toy soldier in his pocket pressed against his thigh, a reminder he allowed himself to carry, but never to look at. Some ghosts were best left buried. Caleb shouldered his rifle and checked his trap lines, scanning the pristine snow for tracks. Instead, he found footprints, barefoot and stumbling, leading into the trees where no one should be. Someone was out there, dying in his sanctuary. Caleb built his isolated life to escape pain, but now a stranger's footprints challenge everything. Should he risk opening old wounds by helping someone who might bring danger to his door? What would you do? Maintain your hard-won peace or reach out to someone in desperate need? Share your thoughts below. If you're intrigued by this tale of survival, healing, and unexpected connection in the harsh Arizona wilderness, follow for the complete story of what happens when a man who's lost everything finds someone with nothing left to lose. The bitter cold of an Arizona mountain winter had kept most men away for 3 months, which was exactly why Caleb Stroud had chosen this place to disappear. Dawn painted the snow-covered pines in blue shadows as he split wood with mechanical precision, each stroke bearing the discipline of his cavalry days. 3 winters alone had taught him efficiency, the difference between survival and freezing to death. His breath clouded before him as he paused, the silence complete except for the distant cry of a hunting coyote. The wooden toy soldier in his pocket pressed against his thigh, a reminder he allowed himself to carry but never to look at. Some ghosts were best left buried. Caleb stacked the wood against the cabin wall, counting mentally. Enough for 4 days if the weather held, 2 if another storm blew in. His fingers, scarred and weathered, worked automatically, while his eyes scanned the tree line from habit. Out here, vigilance wasn't paranoia. It was survival. The coffee pot rattled on the iron stove inside, the only companion to his morning ritual. 1 cup, 1 plate, 1 chair at the rough-hewn table. Simplicity had its comforts when everything else had been stripped away. He paused at the small window, watching sunlight creep across the snow-covered clearing. The cattle would need tending, trap lines checking, water hole cleared of ice. The same tasks as yesterday, the same as tomorrow. Predictable, safe. Caleb shouldered his Winchester and headed toward the tree line, following game trails worn into the snow. His old war wound ached with the cold, a reminder of one life ended and another begun. The deer tracks led northwest, fresh enough that the edges hadn't yet crusted over. Caleb moved with the quiet precision of a man who'd learned that noise meant death, whether in war or wilderness. His breath plumed in the still air as he crouched to examine a split hoofprint. Buck, good size, moving slow through the deep snow. He followed the trail deeper into the pines, where shadows kept the ground frozen hard even at midday. The forest held its breath around him, the silence broken only by the occasional dump of snow from overladen branches. The tracks veered suddenly, joining a second set, human footprints, small and uneven. Barefoot in winter. Caleb's hand tightened on his rifle. Apache, most likely. The reservation lay 30 miles east, but renegades sometimes pass through these mountains. He followed cautiously, reading the story written in the snow. Stumbling steps, falls, places where the person had crawled. Whoever left these tracks was in trouble. The trail ended abruptly in a small clearing. A dark shape lay half buried in snow beneath a pine, so still Caleb might have missed it if not for the contrast against the white ground. He approached carefully, rifle ready. A woman. Apache by her features, though her hair had been roughly cut to shoulder length. Her feet were bare and blue with cold, her buckskin dress inadequate against the bitter chill. No weapons visible. "Hello?" Caleb called, keeping his distance. No response. Her chest barely moved with shallow breaths. Nearly frozen. Then, frontier wisdom said to leave her. Apache troubles weren't his concern. The cavalry had spent years fighting them, and tribal justice was their own business. She might be an outcast, a criminal among her own people, but Caleb had seen enough death. He slung his rifle and knelt beside her, feeling for a pulse. Faint, but present. Her skin burned with cold against his fingertips. "Damn it," he muttered, shrugging off his coat to wrap around her slight form. "Should leave you be." Instead, he lifted her carefully and turned back toward his cabin. The woman weighed almost nothing in Caleb's arms, a bundle of bones and frozen flesh. He trudged through deepening snow as clouds gathered overhead, promising more weather before nightfall. His breath came in sharp bursts, the old wound in his side protesting with each step. "You picked a hell of a day to get yourself lost," he told the unconscious woman, words disappearing into the cold air. The cabin appeared through the trees, smoke still rising from the chimney. Caleb shouldered the door open and carried her inside, laying her carefully on his narrow bed. Up close, he could see ritual scars on her hands, a healer perhaps. Her cut hair suggested punishment or mourning, not his business either way. He stoked the fire higher, then turned his attention to her frozen feet. Frostbite, but not too severe if treated quickly. The cavalry had taught him that much, how to save men from winter's bite when doctors weren't available. Caleb worked methodically, using snow to gradually warm her extremities, checking for deeper injuries. A fresh bruise darkened her cheekbone. Someone had struck her before sending her into the wilderness to die. "You're safe now," he said, though she couldn't hear him. The words felt strange in his mouth after years of speaking only to himself and his horse. Movement caught his eye through the window. Riders approaching from the east, 3 men following the trail he'd left in the snow. Their purposeful pace suggested they weren't lost travelers. Caleb's hand moved to his holstered Colt. Whoever they were, they'd find an Apache woman in his cabin. In this territory, that meant trouble. He had about 5 minutes to decide what kind of man he still was. Caleb draped a blanket over the unconscious woman, then positioned himself by the window, Colt in hand. The riders approached with the confidence of men with authority, or men who believed they had it. Marshal Warren Blackwood led the group, his silver star catching weak sunlight as he dismounted at the fence line. Caleb hadn't seen him since returning from the war, but his reputation had grown, hard on Indians, friendly with settlers, especially those with money. Caleb tucked the revolver into his waistband, covered it with his vest, and stepped onto the porch. Best to meet them outside, away from what lay within. "Marshal," he called, keeping his voice even. "Long ride from town in this weather." Blackwood approached, 2 deputies flanking him. His eyes, sharp beneath a battered hat, missed nothing. "Stroud, been a while. Still playing hermit, I see. Just living quiet?" Caleb leaned against the doorframe, blocking the entrance. "Something I can help you with?" tracking some Apache troublemakers. Blackwood's gaze drifted to the footprints in the snow, then back to Caleb's face. Group from the reservation slipped away. One's a woman, dangerous type, stirring up old ways, making trouble. Haven't seen any Indians, Caleb said, the lie easy on his tongue. Just deer tracks this morning. Blackwood studied him, recognition flickering in his eyes. Served together in the 10th, didn't we? Before you went civilian. Different times. Indeed. The marshal gestured toward the cabin. Mind if we warm up inside? Been riding since dawn. A test. Caleb kept his expression neutral. Place is a mess. Got coffee brewing, though. Can bring it out. Blackwood's eyes narrowed slightly. That's neighborly enough, I suppose. Coffee would do fine. Caleb poured coffee into tin cups with steady hands, acutely aware of the woman lying silent in his cabin. The men huddled near the corral, stamping feet against the cold. Been meaning to ask, Blackwood said, accepting a steaming cup. Ever have trouble with Indians up here? Isolated place like this makes an easy target. No trouble, Caleb replied. Keep to myself. Smart man. Blackwood sipped the coffee, eyes scanning the property. Times are changing, though. Government's tightening things up. Anyone harboring hostiles faces serious charges now. One of the deputies, a young man with hungry eyes, pointed toward the tree line. Those your tracks headed north, Stroud? Hunting, Caleb said. Deer. Looked like you were carrying something back, the deputy pressed. Got my deer. Caleb met the man's stare without blinking. Hanging in the shed out back, Blackwood handed back his empty cup. Well, we won't trouble you further, but keep your eyes open. That Apache woman, she's a witch doctor of sorts, got her exiled from her own people for dangerous practices. You see anything, you ride straight to town. Will do, Caleb said, collecting the cups. Storm's brewing, might want to head back before it hits. Blackwood nodded, then paused. One more thing, Stroud. Laws particular about people helping Indians off reservation. Federal offense now. Man could lose his land, freedom too. Understood. The marshal tipped his hat. Good hunting, then. Caleb watched them ride east toward town, a knot tightening in his stomach. They'd be back. Men like Blackwood always came back. Inside, the woman remained still on his bed, her breathing steadier now. He'd just made himself an enemy of the law for a stranger who might not survive the night. The storm arrived with dusk, howling around the cabin's corners like a living thing. Caleb kept vigil by the fire, cleaning his rifle with practiced movements while watching the woman for signs of consciousness. Her fever had broken an hour past, which he counted as a victory. The frostbite on her toes and fingers would heal without amputation if infection stayed away. Whatever the Apache had done to earn exile, death by freezing seemed excessive punishment. A soft moan drew his attention. The woman's eyes fluttered open, dark, intelligent eyes that instantly assessed her surroundings. When they found Caleb, they widened in alarm. She scrambled backward against the wall, ignoring her injuries, speaking rapid Apache that Caleb couldn't understand. Easy, he said, setting the rifle aside slowly. Not going to hurt you. She switched to broken English, voice raw. Why I here? What you want? Found you in the snow. Brought you back before you froze. Caleb stayed where he was, giving her space. Marshall came looking. Told him I hadn't seen you. Suspicion darkened her features. Why help? A fair question. Caleb considered it himself. Seemed wrong to let you die. She studied him, calculation replacing fear. They come back. Probably. Caleb nodded toward the window, where snow now fell in thick curtains. Not tonight, though. Storm's got us locked in tight. The woman touched her shortened hair self-consciously. I am Ayanna. Caleb Stroud. He poured water into a cup and offered it from a distance. The marshal said you were exiled by your people, said you were dangerous. Ayanna took the cup with shaking hands, pride visible beneath her weakness. Not dangerous, dishonored, failed to give chief sons, cut hair, sent away to die. Caleb nodded, understanding tribal politics enough to recognize injustice. Storm's going to keep us here a few days. You're welcome to shelter until you heal. Her eyes held his, measuring truth. Why? Everyone deserves mercy, he said simply, even in winter. 3 days of snowbound confinement had established an uneasy routine. Caleb slept on the floor near the fire, giving Ayanna the bed. They spoke little, existing in parallel within the cabin's close quarters. She watched him constantly, as if expecting the terms of her shelter to change without warning. On the 4th morning, Caleb woke to the sound of labored breathing. Ayanna lay curled on the bed, her face flushed with fever, lips cracked and dry. The healing progress of days past had reversed overnight. Ayanna. He approached cautiously, respecting the invisible boundary between them. You're sick. Her eyes, bright with fever, found his. Cold sickness. In lungs now. She coughed, a wet, dangerous sound. Need medicine? Willow bark. Sage. Caleb checked his meager supplies. Nothing for fever beyond whiskey and prayer, neither particularly effective. The storm had passed, but had left 3 feet of fresh snow across the landscape. Town was 15 miles east, a difficult journey in good conditions. I'll have to go for supplies, he said, checking through the window at the clear, brutal cold of the morning. Can you hold until tomorrow? Ayanna shook her head weakly. Not wait. Fever spirit strong. Caleb recognized the gravity in her voice. He'd seen men die from winter pneumonia during the war, seen how quickly it could turn deadly. His supplies were already stretched thin, with coffee and flour nearly gone. I'll go today, he decided, pulling on his heaviest coat. There's water here, jerky in that pouch. Keep the fire fed. Why risk, she asked, struggling to sit up. I am nothing to you. Caleb paused at the door, considering her question. Man gets tired of letting people die when he might have helped. He shouldered his rifle and stepped into the blinding white world, the cold instantly stealing his breath. The journey to town became a battle against nature itself. Caleb's horse struggled through drifts that sometimes reached its belly, steam puffing from its nostrils in the frigid air. By midday, Caleb's toes had gone numb despite his lined boots, and his fingers could barely maintain grip on the reins. The landscape had transformed into something alien, familiar landmarks buried, trails obliterated. He navigated by the sun and memory, pushing forward with grim determination. Stopping meant death in this cold. 3 miles from town, the horse stumbled in a hidden depression, nearly throwing Caleb. He dismounted to check its leg. No break, but the animal was exhausted, flanks heaving. Come on, boy, he murmured, leading the horse forward on foot. Just a little further. The town of Pine Ridge appeared through the trees like a mirage, smoke rising from chimneys, the promise of warmth and civilization. Caleb felt the stares as he led his horse down the main street, a ghost returning to the world of men. The general store stood at the far end, its windows frosted over. Next door, the blacksmith's forge glowed orange against the white landscape. Thomas Cooper, a broad-shouldered half-Mexican man Caleb had known before his self-imposed exile, looked up from his work. Stroud? Thomas set down his hammer. Thought winter might have finally taken you. Not yet, Caleb replied, his voice rough from disuse. Horse needs rest. I need supplies. Thomas studied him with sharp eyes. Must be important to risk this journey. Medicine, Caleb said simply. Fever. Understanding dawned on Thomas's weathered face. You're not fevered. No. Thomas nodded slowly. Eleanor's got supplies at the store. I'll stable your horse. He lowered his voice. Marshall's been asking questions about Apache movements, about you. Caleb felt ice that had nothing to do with the weather. I keep to myself. That's what I told him. Thomas took the horse's reins. Some folks remember you stood for what's right before. Others just remember you wore the blue. I'm just here for supplies. Of course. Thomas glanced toward the store. Whatever you need medicine for, I hope it heals quick. Bad time to be noticed, Caleb. Caleb nodded his thanks and trudged toward the store, the weight of the town's curious eyes heavy on his back. The journey back proceeded under darkening skies. Caleb's saddlebags carried medicine, flour, coffee, and, hidden beneath more innocent supplies, ammunition for his rifle. Thomas's warning echoed in his mind as he pushed his rested horse through the snow, racing the approaching dusk. Eleanor at the store had asked no questions, but her eyes had lingered on his purchases: willow bark, sage, honey, items for sick rooms, not bachelor cabins. Word would spread. In small towns, secrets had short lives. Halfway home, Caleb spotted tracks crossing his trail, 3 horses heading toward his cabin. Fresh, made since his departure that morning. His hands tightened on the reins. Blackwood. He urged his mount faster, ignoring the animal's fatigue. The cabin appeared through the trees as last light faded from the sky, its windows dark. No horses stood outside. No smoke rose from the chimney. Caleb approached cautiously, rifle ready. The door hung open, banging gently in the wind. Inside, the fire had died to embers, and the cabin stood empty. The bed where Ayanna had lain was vacant, blankets thrown aside. Cold dread washed through him. Had Blackwood found her? Taken her to town for whatever passed as justice in these parts? Then he saw it, a small leather pouch on the table that hadn't been there before. Inside lay dried herbs and a crude drawing, 3 figures approaching a square, then a single figure moving beneath the square. Caleb dropped to his knees and peered under the cabin's raised floor. 2 fevered eyes stared back at him from the darkness. Smart, Caleb said, helping Ayanna from her hiding place beneath the floorboards. How did you know to hide? Heard horses, she whispered, her voice weaker than before. Men searching. Called your name. Caleb rekindled the fire with quick, efficient movements, then prepared the medicine from his saddlebags. Marshall Blackwood? She nodded, shivering despite the blanket he'd wrapped around her shoulders. Said find you, said find woman. They're gone now. Caleb mixed willow bark and sage with hot water and honey. Drink this. It will help the fever. Ayanna accepted the cup, studying his face over the steam. You came back. Said I would. She sipped the bitter tea, grimacing. Why? Truth this time. Caleb sat heavily on the floor, exhaustion from the journey settling into his bones. Lost my wife and son to smallpox 3 years ago. Was away fighting when fever took them. The words felt strange, unused for so long. Couldn't help them, maybe can help you. Understanding softened Ayanna's eyes. I was healer, before exile. No death guilt in your face. What happened to you? Caleb asked. The real story. Chief took me for wife. Old man. Wanted sons. Her voice strengthened with anger. When no sons came, said I was cursed, cut my hair, cast out to die in snow. They sat in silence as the fire crackled between them, two souls stripped of their places in the world. Thank you, she said finally, for medicine, for return. Caleb nodded, something long frozen within him shifting slightly. Rest now. Medicine needs sleep to work. Her hand, still hot with fever, briefly touched his. You too. A week passed in the isolation of winter. The medicine worked slowly, but steadily. Ayana's fever broke on the third night, leaving her weak but clear-eyed. Caleb maintained his distance, respectful of her space, yet found himself speaking more than he had in years. She proved to be a keen observer, watching his movements with analytical precision. Your side pains you, she noted one evening as he winced while adding wood to the fire. Old wound, not healing right. Shrapnel, Caleb confirmed. From the war, doctor said it would work itself out eventually. Ayana shook her head. Not working out, festering inside. She gestured to her medicine pouch. I can help, if you allow. Caleb hesitated. The wound had troubled him for years, a constant companion of pain he'd learned to ignore. Apache medicine. Human medicine, she corrected. Pain is pain. Healing is healing. That night he permitted her to examine the old wound. Her fingers moved with practiced confidence, finding the source of infection with unerring accuracy. The poultice she applied burned, then soothed, drawing poison he hadn't known remained. War wound, she said, wrapping a clean cloth around his torso. You were soldier? Cavalry scout, 10th Regiment. Her hands paused. Fought my people. Yes. Ayana tied off the bandage, her expression unreadable. Now you help one, you fought. Now you heal one who fought you, Caleb countered. A ghost of a smile touched her lips. Life has strange circles. In the days that followed, they established a routine of mutual support. She prepared medicines and tended his wound. He hunted and maintained their shelter. Words came easier between them, bridging the divide of different worlds. The pain in Caleb's side diminished daily, as if more than physical poison was being drawn away. The sound of approaching horses shattered their fragile peace. Caleb was checking trap lines when he heard them, multiple riders approaching from the east, moving with purpose. He raced back to the cabin, finding Ayana already alert to the danger. 4 horses, she said, gathering her few possessions. Coming fast. Blackwood, Caleb confirmed, peering through the window. With deputies. Official visit this time. He turned to her. Hyde Place again? She nodded, moving toward the loose floorboard. What will you say? Whatever keeps you safe. Caleb checked his revolver, then thought better of it, returning it to its holster. Just stay quiet, no matter what you hear. Marshal Blackwood dismounted with the confidence of a man accustomed to authority. 3 deputies flanked him, hands resting casually on holstered weapons. One carried papers, a search warrant, Caleb realized with sinking certainty. Marshal, Caleb greeted, stepping onto the porch. Twice in 2 weeks. I'm getting popular. Stroud. Blackwood's smile didn't reach his eyes. Got reports you were in town buying medicines. Woman's medicines. Caught a fever, Caleb said evenly. Thomas can confirm. Nearly froze getting supplies. Blackwood nodded, as if this confirmed something. We've had word from the reservation. That Apache woman we discussed. She stole sacred items before running. Dangerous items. Haven't seen any Apache, Caleb repeated his earlier lie. Then you won't mind if we look around. Blackwood produced the papers. Federal warrant, authorized to search any property suspected of harboring fugitives from the reservation. Caleb accepted the document, recognizing the legal weight behind it. Seems excessive for one woman. Orders from above. Blackwood gestured to his men. Check everything. Outbuildings, root cellar, under the floorboards if necessary. Caleb's heart stuttered at the last directive, but his face remained impassive. Help yourselves. I'll put on coffee. The search proceeded with methodical thoroughness. Deputies rifled through Caleb's sparse possessions, checked the barn, probed the snow around the cabin. Caleb maintained casual conversation with Blackwood, discussing weather, cattle prices, anything to appear cooperative. One deputy paused near the loose floorboard, tapping it with his boot. Sounds hollow, he called. Storage space, Caleb explained. For root vegetables. Empty now. Blackwood studied Caleb's face. Open it. Caleb knelt and lifted the board, revealing the dark, empty space beneath. The deputy thrust his rifle into the cavity, probing. Nothing, he confirmed. Caleb released a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. After the marshal's party departed, the cabin remained silent for long minutes. Caleb checked each window, confirming they were truly gone before tapping lightly on the wall behind the stove. They're gone, he called softly. You can come out. A section of wall paneling shifted, revealing a narrow space between the logs and the chimney stone. Ayanna emerged, covered in soot, but unharmed. You moved hiding place, Caleb observed, impressed. Heard them say floorboards through wall crack. She brushed dust from her clothes. Made new space while you distracted. Caleb shook his head in admiration. Quick thinking. Survival thinking. She looked toward the window. They will return, with more men, more papers. Probably. Caleb began clearing the disruption caused by the search. Blackwood doesn't give up easily. Why risk for me? Ayanna asked, the question that had hung between them for weeks. Truth now. Caleb considered his answer carefully. Started as basic decency. Now, he struggled to find words for the unfamiliar feeling. Now you're someone worth protecting. Their eyes met across the small room, understanding passing between them. Ayanna crossed to him slowly, her hand reaching out to rest against his chest. Your heart has been cold, like winter. Her voice was soft, but still beats. Yours too, he replied, noticing how her eyes softened when she wasn't guarding herself. The distance between them vanished as she leaned forward, her lips meeting his with hesitant certainty. The kiss lasted only moments, but broke something frozen within Caleb, a dam long sealed against feeling. When they separated, Ayanna's eyes held a mixture of wonder and fear. I should not have. Yes, Caleb interrupted gently. You should. She smiled then, a real smile that transformed her face. Perhaps winter can end early this year. Spring's first tentative advances appeared in late March, patches of ground emerging from melting snow, longer days, birdsong returning to the pines. Caleb and Ayanna had settled into a partnership of shared tasks and growing closeness, their initial wariness replaced by something neither named but both treasured. On a clear morning, Caleb returned from checking his cattle to find Ayanna sitting still as stone by the window, her face unreadable. What's wrong? He asked, setting down his rifle. When Moon last came for me, she said carefully, I bled. Moon should come again. Has not. Understanding dawned slowly. You're with child? She nodded once, uncertainty in her eyes. Apache woman, white man's child. Neither world will accept. Caleb crossed to her, kneeling beside her chair. My child, too. Our child. Blackwood will use this. Others will hate. Her hand moved protectively to her stomach. Child will have hard path. Unless we make it easier, Caleb took her hand in his. We could leave, go north or west, start fresh. Ayanna studied his face. Run and hide. That is not you. Not anymore. No, he admitted. It's not. Then we stay, she decided. We fight for child's right to exist between worlds. Caleb nodded, resolution hardening. Together. April brought mud season to the high country, the world caught between winter's grip and spring's promise. Supplies had dwindled during the long isolation, forcing Caleb to make another journey to town. This time, Ayanna's pregnancy added new items to his list: medicines against morning sickness, extra food for her increasing appetite, fabric for new clothing. I should come with you, she said, as he prepared to leave. Too dangerous, Caleb replied, checking his revolver. Blackwood has eyes everywhere. Cannot hide forever. Her hand rested on her still flat stomach. Soon will show. I know. He kissed her forehead. But today isn't that day. Pineridge had changed little since his last visit. The same buildings lined the muddy street. The same faces turned to watch his arrival with suspicion. Caleb tied his horse outside the general store and entered, mentally preparing for the inevitable questions. Eleanor Simmons stood behind the counter, her gray hair pulled tight beneath a lace cap. Her eyes widened slightly at his appearance. Mr. Stroud, twice in one season. We're honored. Need supplies, Caleb said, handing over his list. Eleanor studied the paper, her eyebrows rising. Ginger root, raspberry leaf, calico fabric. She looked up sharply. Expecting company, are we? Just restocking. Of course. She began gathering items. Marshal Blackwood was asking after you just yesterday. Seemed quite interested in your situation. Caleb kept his expression neutral. Nothing interesting about me. Perhaps not. Eleanor leaned closer. Though there's talk about smoke from your chimney when you were in town last. About 2 people seen near your property. People talk too much. Indeed they do. She wrapped his purchases carefully. Especially about an Apache woman living with a white man. Makes for interesting conversation. Caleb's hand instinctively moved toward his gun. Sounds like dangerous gossip. Very, Eleanor agreed. For everyone involved. Caleb paid for his supplies and stepped back onto the street, aware of eyes following his movements. He headed toward the blacksmith's, hoping Thomas might provide better information than Eleanor's veiled warnings. He never made it. Marshal Blackwood and 2 deputies emerged from the saloon, deliberately positioning themselves in his path. Stroud, Blackwood called, loud enough for the gathering onlookers to hear. Just the man I wanted to see. Caleb stopped, keeping his hands visible. Marshal, been hearing interesting stories about your mountain retreat. Blackwood approached with casual menace. About company you're keeping. Live alone, Caleb said evenly. Always have. That so? Blackwood glanced at the package under Caleb's arm. Buying women's things for yourself these days? A small crowd had gathered, drawn by the confrontation. Caleb recognized the danger in their expressions, the mixture of curiosity and prejudice that could turn deadly. My purchases are my business. Not when they involve harboring a reservation runaway. Blackwood's voice hardened. That's federal business. My business. If you have accusations, make them official, Caleb challenged. All in good time. Blackwood smiled thinly. Meanwhile, might be best if certain establishments declined your custom for their own protection. The threat was clear. Caleb looked around at the townsfolk, people he'd known before his self-imposed exile, now regarding him with suspicion or outright hostility. Only Thomas, watching from his forge doorway, showed anything resembling sympathy. "Understood," Caleb said finally. "I'll be on my way." "One more thing," Blackwood added as Caleb turned to leave. "Judge Franklin rides circuit next month. A man living in sin with an Indian woman might find himself answering difficult questions, legal questions." Caleb mounted his horse without reply, aware that his silence confirmed everything. As he rode out of town, the weight of their rejection settled on him like a physical burden. Caleb returned to find Ayanna waiting anxiously by the window. One look at his face told her everything. "They know," she said simply. "Yes." He unpacked the supplies mechanically. "Town's closed to us now." Blackwood's made sure of that. Ayanna absorbed this news with the stoicism of someone accustomed to rejection. What happens now? Judge arrives next month. Blackwood plans to make trouble. Caleb sat heavily at the table, the day's confrontation weighing on him. "This won't end well, Ayanna. Not for you, not for the child. So we run?" The question held no judgment, only practicality. Caleb stared at his hands, capable hands that had killed in war, built this home, now cradled her face in the night. "Maybe we should. North, perhaps. Canada. They say things are different there." She knelt before him, taking his hands in hers. "You would leave your home for me?" "This was never really home," he admitted. "Just a place to hide from memories. You've become more home to me than these walls." Ayanna studied his face, her healer's eyes seeing deeper than his words. "Running is fear. You are not fear, Caleb Stroud. Not anymore." "What then?" he asked, frustration edging his voice. "Fight the whole town. The law? The world that says we shouldn't exist together?" "Yes." The simple certainty in her voice stopped him. "Fight for what is right, for child who deserves place in this world. It might cost us everything." "Already lost everything once," she reminded him, "found something better." Her hand moved to her stomach. "Worth fighting for?" Caleb felt something resolute settle within him, not the reckless courage of youth, but the steadier bravery of a man with purpose. "Together, then," he said, drawing her close. "Whatever comes." A knock at the door shattered the moment, sending them both reaching for weapons. "Stroud?" a young voice called. "Need to talk. Alone." Caleb opened the door with his revolver ready, finding a young man standing nervously on the porch. He recognized him immediately. Jacob Blackwood, the marshal's son, barely 20 years old, and wearing his father's determined expression without the hardness. "What are you doing here?" Caleb demanded, not lowering his weapon. "Came to warn you," Jacob said, his eyes darting to the gun and back to Caleb's face. "My father's organizing a party. Plans to arrest you before the judge arrives." Caleb studied the young man, looking for deception. "Why tell me this?" "Because it's wrong." Jacob's voice strengthened. "Father says he's upholding the law, but this isn't about law. It's about him deciding who deserves justice." Ayanna appeared in the shadows behind Caleb, watching silently. "You're risking a lot coming here," Caleb observed. Jacob nodded. "I remember when you served with him. how you left when things got compromised. He's never forgiven that. That why he's so determined? Old grudges? Partly, Jacob admitted. But there's more. Judge Franklin isn't like the others. Can't be bought or bullied. Father wants this settled before he arrives. Caleb finally lowered his weapon, recognizing truth when he heard it. When's he coming? The arrest party. 3 days, Dawn. Jacob glanced nervously over his shoulder. I should go, if he knew I was here. Thank you, Ayanna said, stepping forward, for risking safety. Jacob looked at her fully for the first time, surprise crossing his features at her condition, now just beginning to show. Understanding dawned in his eyes. That's why, he murmured, the child. Caleb nodded. Changes things, doesn't it? It should, Jacob agreed. For what it's worth, I hope Judge Franklin sees it that way too. As the young man disappeared into the gathering dusk, Caleb turned to Ayanna. We need help, and I know where to find it. Thomas Cooper's forge glowed like a beacon in the pre-dawn darkness. The blacksmith worked alone, hammer ringing against hot metal, when Caleb slipped through the back door, Ayanna close behind. Thomas paused mid-strike, unsurprised by their appearance. Wondered when you'd come. Need your help, Caleb said without preamble. Figured as much. Thomas set down his hammer, wiping sweaty hands on his leather apron. His eyes moved to Ayanna, noting her condition with a slight nod. Town's been humming with talk. None of it good. Blackwood's coming for us, Caleb explained. Before the judge arrives. Thomas nodded. 3 days. I heard. We need somewhere safe until the judge gets here, someone who can speak for Ayanna's character. The blacksmith considered this, his expression thoughtful. Sarah Wheeler, midwife, lives outside town. She's helped Indian women before. Reservation and off. Good woman, discreet. Will she risk Blackwood's anger? Ayanna asked. Sarah fears God more than men with badges, Thomas said simply. And she's got no love for Blackwood since he refused to investigate when her sister's Apache husband disappeared. We'll need more than sanctuary, Caleb pressed. Need legal standing, something that gives Judge Franklin reason to rule in our favor. Marriage, Thomas suggested, not recognized by territorial law between white and Indian, but Franklin's different. Man believes in higher principles, might recognize a marriage conducted in good faith. Who would perform such a ceremony? Ayanna asked. I would, came a female voice from the doorway. A stern-faced woman in her late 30s stood there, medical bag in hand. Sarah Wheeler. Thomas sent word. You're not a minister, Caleb observed. No, she agreed, but I am a witness before God. Sometimes that's enough. She approached Ayanna, professional eyes assessing her condition. Thomas says you need help, a safe place, and legitimacy for your child. Ayanna nodded. You would do this? For strangers? For justice, Sarah corrected, and for that child. Every soul deserves a fair start. Sarah's home stood a mile beyond town limits, a modest cabin surrounded by carefully tended herb gardens just beginning to green with spring. For 2 days it became their sanctuary and war room. Thomas brought news from town, reporting Blackwood's growing frustration as he searched for them. He's convinced someone's hiding you, Thomas reported on the second evening, searching every homestead within riding distance. How long until he finds this place? Caleb asked. Soon, Sarah admitted, setting down her knitting. But I've sent word to Judge Franklin through my cousin who works the stage route. He knows to come directly here before announcing his arrival in town. Ayanna sat nearby, helping Sarah prepare medicines. The midwife had examined her thoroughly, pronouncing both mother and child healthy despite the hardships. The judge will arrive tomorrow, Sarah continued. If he agrees to hear your case immediately, Blackwood will have no grounds for arrest." "And if he doesn't?" Caleb pressed. Sarah's expression tightened. "Then we pray." That night, with the others asleep, Caleb and Ayanna stood beneath the stars behind Sarah's cabin. Without ceremony or witnesses beyond the night sky, they exchanged promises. "I take you as my wife," Caleb said simply, holding her hands in his. "Before Creator and spirits," Ayanna responded in kind, using the words of her people, "I accept you as my husband." They sealed their vows with a kiss, the simple ceremony more meaningful for its privacy and sincerity. "Whatever happens tomorrow," Caleb whispered against her hair, "this is real, no matter what any judge or marshal says." "Two worlds meeting," Ayanna agreed, "creating something new." The distant sound of hoofbeats interrupted their moment. Thomas appeared at the back door, his expression grave. "Riders coming," he warned. "At least 6 men. Blackwood's found us." Caleb's hand moved to his gun. "Then he finds us ready." Dawn painted the eastern sky in tentative gold as Blackwood's posse surrounded Sarah's cabin. Caleb positioned himself on the porch, rifle visible but not aimed, while Thomas stood beside him. Inside, Sarah remained with Ayanna, the 2 women watching through partially closed curtains. "Stroud!" Blackwood called from horseback, 5 deputies flanking him. "You're harboring a fugitive from the reservation. Come out peacefully, bring the woman, and we'll make this civilized." "No law against giving shelter to someone in need," Caleb replied evenly. "And she's my wife now." Mocking laughter erupted from the deputies. Blackwood's face darkened with anger. "Marriage between white and Indian isn't recognized in this territory. You know that." "Judge Franklin might see things differently," Thomas interjected. "Man of principle, they say." "Franklin's not here," Blackwood snapped. "I am, and I have warrants for both of you, Stroud for harboring a fugitive, the woman for stealing sacred items from her tribe." "What items?" Caleb challenged. "There were none when I found her half frozen in the snow. She was cast out to die for failing to give an old man sons." A deputy spat into the dirt. "Savage customs ain't our concern. Law is law." "Indeed it is," came a new voice from behind the posse. The riders turned to find a distinguished older man astride a dappled gray horse. His clothing marked him as a man of law, not the rough frontier justice of Blackwood, but the methodical certainty of formal education and authority. "Judge Emmett Franklin," the man introduced himself, guiding his horse through the surprised deputies. "I received an urgent message about a matter requiring immediate attention." His sharp eyes took in the scene. Armed men surrounding a cabin, Caleb and Thomas standing their ground. "Your Honor," Blackwood began, "I'm executing legal warrants." "Which can wait," Franklin interrupted firmly, "until I've heard all sides. That is still how justice works in this territory, is it not, Marshal?" Judge Franklin converted Sarah's kitchen into an impromptu courtroom. He sat at the head of the table, Blackwood and his senior deputy to one side, Caleb and Ayanna to the other. Sarah and Thomas stood as witnesses, while the remaining deputies waited outside. "This is highly irregular," Blackwood protested. "These proceedings should be conducted in town, with proper—" "I'll determine what's proper, Marshal," Franklin interrupted. "Now, I understand you have warrants. Present your case." Blackwood outlined the charges methodically. Ayanna fleeing the reservation without permission, Caleb harboring her illegally, their purported marriage violating territorial statutes prohibiting such unions. "And the charge of stealing sacred items?" Franklin inquired. "According to reservation authorities, she took ceremonial objects before leaving." Franklin turned to Ayanna. "Ma'am, Did you take anything when you left your people? Ayanna straightened, meeting the judge's eyes directly. Only my medicine pouch, given to me when I became healer, my right to carry. She was found with nothing else, Caleb confirmed, nearly frozen to death, hair cut short as punishment. Franklin studied Ayanna thoughtfully. Why were you exiled, ma'am? Failed to give chief sons, she replied simply. Married against my will. When no children came, said I was cursed, cut my hair, sent away to die. And now you carry a child, Franklin observed. Mr. Stroud's child? Yes. Her hand moved protectively to her stomach. Our child. Franklin turned to Sarah. Mrs. Wheeler, as a midwife, can you confirm her condition? I can, Sarah affirmed. Approximately 3 months along. Healthy mother and child, despite the hardships they've endured. And you performed a marriage ceremony? I witnessed their vows before God, Sarah replied carefully. Though I understand the territorial statutes don't recognize such unions. Franklin nodded, turning to Blackwood. Marshal, are you aware that the Supreme Court recently heard arguments in Standing Bear v. Crook regarding the legal personhood of Native Americans? Blackwood shifted uncomfortably. Heard something about it. The court's position is evolving, Franklin continued. The question of whether an Indian can leave a reservation of their own free will is not as settled as it once was. With respect, Your Honor, Blackwood pressed, territorial law is clear regarding mixed marriages. Laws change, Marshal, Franklin replied, often because someone had the courage to challenge them. He turned back to Caleb and Ayanna. I'd like to hear about your intentions, for yourselves and your child. Caleb looked at Ayanna, then back to the judge. To build a life together, to raise our child with respect for both heritages, to be left in peace. A simple request, Franklin mused, yet one that seems to threaten so many. Judge Franklin deliberated silently for several minutes while tension filled the small kitchen. Finally, he straightened in his chair, decision evident in his bearing. I find myself in an unusual position, he began. Territorial law indeed prohibits marriages between whites and Indians. However, the law does not explicitly address the status of children born of such unions, nor does it account for changing federal perspectives on native personhood. Blackwood began to protest, but Franklin silenced him with a raised hand. In the matter of Ayanna's alleged theft, I find insufficient evidence to support the charge. A medicine pouch given to her as a healer remains her property, regardless of tribal politics. He turned to Caleb and Ayanna. Regarding your union, I cannot officially recognize it under current territorial statutes. However, he paused significantly, I can acknowledge your child's right to both parents. Therefore, I issue the following ruling. Ayanna may remain with Caleb Stroud as the mother of his child, without risk of forcible return to the reservation. Relief washed over their faces as Franklin continued. Furthermore, I am issuing a writ of protection for both parties until federal clarification on these matters is provided. Marshal Blackwood, you will respect this writ or answer to higher authorities than those in this territory. Blackwood's expression hardened, but he nodded stiffly. As you say, Your Honor. This case has illuminated the need for clearer guidance on these matters, Franklin concluded. I shall be writing to the territorial governor recommending review of our statutes concerning mixed families. As the impromptu court adjourned, Jacob Blackwood appeared in the doorway, relief visible on his face. His father brushed past him without acknowledgment, defeated but unrepentant. Judge Franklin approached Caleb and Ayanna before departing. Your path won't be easy, he warned quietly. The law may recognize you now, but people change more slowly than statutes. We know, Caleb replied, taking Ayanna's hand. But it's a beginning. Indeed, Franklin agreed. Sometimes that's all justice can offer. A beginning. We've traveled a difficult path through the snow-covered mountains of northern Arizona, witnessing two souls find unexpected connection in the harshest of circumstances. If you're feeling the emotional weight of Caleb and Ayanna's journey, their initial wariness, their gradual trust, their fight against prejudice and isolation, I understand completely. Their story has left its mark on me, too, a reminder of how connection can thaw even the most frozen hearts. There's something about winter's unforgiving grip that strips away pretense and reveals our true nature. Caleb spent 3 years buried in isolation, convinced his failure to save his family had defined him forever. But redemption isn't about erasing our losses. It's about finding the courage to open ourselves to new possibilities when the opportunity presents itself. That moment when we choose between remaining safely numb or risking the pain that comes with caring again. What struck me most while exploring Caleb and Ayanna's story was how their individual brokenness created something stronger when brought together. They weren't just two wounded people seeking shelter, they were healers for each other. Ayanna's medicine drew poison from Caleb's physical wound, while his protection allowed her spirit to recover from exile. Sometimes the people we rescue end up rescuing us in return. Their struggle against prejudice resonates beyond the frontier setting. We may not face territorial marshals or tribal exile, but we all encounter moments when standing for love means standing against convention. When creating family means redefining what family can be. Caleb and Ayanna's Arizona may be long past, but the courage to choose connection over isolation remains as relevant as this morning's sunrise. In the end, they learned what the frontier taught those brave enough to listen. We're not defined by what we've lost, but by what we choose to build from the ruins. Second chances aren't given. They're created through daily acts of courage, commitment, and compassion. Thank you for traveling this snowy trail with me. Stories only truly live when they find readers willing to invest their hearts in flawed characters seeking healing. Your willingness to follow Caleb and Ayanna from winter's bitter cold to spring's promise is what transforms mere words into something that matters. Winter's mercy got me thinking about the spaces between cultures, between past and future, between isolation and connection. We all face moments when building something new requires the courage to step beyond comfortable boundaries. What walls have you broken through to create something meaningful in your life? Share your story in the comments, because genuine connection deserves to be honored, whether it happens on the frontier or in your own backyard. If Caleb and Ayanna's journey toward healing touched something in your spirit, I'd be grateful if you'd hit that like button and consider subscribing. The American West holds countless stories of people finding unexpected grace in harsh circumstances, and I'd be honored to share more of them with you. Until next time, may your winters be bearable and your mercies abundant.